Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the weekend of September the 14th and 15th, 2024. So the big event this weekend is a trine aspect between Venus and Jupiter. And I've seen on YouTube people making whole videos about Venus trine Jupiter and how wonderful it is. And so I did want to consider how wonderful Venus trine Jupiter is. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at some examples of people who do have Venus trine Jupiter. You can see some of them in the thumbnail. For example, we've got Joe Biden, and we've got Jesse Livermore, who was one of the most successful private investors who ever lived, and Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, who was something of an anti-hero. He did die of a heroin overdose. By the way, Jesse Livermore, he committed suicide. He finally went bankrupt for the final time. He made a lot of money, lost a lot of money, and in the end he killed himself. Joe Biden is alive and well. Then we got an organisation who has got Venus trine Jupiter, and that is the German right-wing party, the Alternative for Deutschland, or Alternative for Germany, and they were founded at the time of Venus trine Jupiter. So, is it a good aspect? Is it a bad aspect? I know on paper it's a good aspect, but in practice, how good is it? I've got a Venus trine Jupiter, by the way, and I might have a quick look at my chart if there is time. But before I look at Venus trine Jupiter, I want to consider what is happening from a perspective of the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is, not today, for the weekend of September the 14th and 15th, 2024. Just a reminder, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you enjoy this video and you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. Okay, so let's look at what's happening this weekend. So here is a chart for the weekend. This chart is set for New York for midnight on Sunday the 15th. And you can see that the moon is in Aquarius. The moon is at 11:55 Aquarius. So on Saturday, New York time London time, so UK time, at 8:53 in the morning, the moon moves from Capricorn to Aquarius. So if you're in Europe and the Americas, you can safely say that the moon is in Aquarius all weekend. In the morning in Europe, there may be a time when the moon is in Capricorn, but I think to make things simple, you can regard it as a moon in Aquarius weekend. Now, if you're in the Americas, or if you're in New York, for example, it would move into Aquarius at 3:53 a.m. and on the west coast just after midnight on Saturday. So that's the moon. It's in Aquarius, and I don't know. We've just had the moon being in Capricorn, and there is a slight change of emphasis. Moon in Capricorn, moon in Aquarius, both signs are ruled by Saturn, but I suppose with moon in Aquarius, there's a little more detachment from moon in Capricorn. Moon in Aquarius is an air sign compared with an earth sign, so perhaps there's less emphasis on the material things, perhaps more emphasis on ideas, and perhaps being original. Now, originality, is something very personal. We have to remember that. Sometimes we try very hard to be original, but in our efforts to be original, we're just following the crowd. I know that sounds a bit of a contradictory thing to say, but we have to be careful with that. There's no need to follow the crowd. However hard we're trying to be original, originality has to come from ourselves. But this moon does aspect Venus and Jupiter in the end, towards the end of the weekend. But perhaps what's most important is the fact that Venus and Jupiter are making a trine aspect. So there's Venus and there's Jupiter. They're 120 degrees apart. This is what people are getting excited about. And, Venus is the most, it's not the most fortunate planet. It's Jupiter, I suppose, is the most fortunate planet, but Venus is a benefic, so is Jupiter. Jupiter is a greater benefic, Venus is the lesser benefic. So you would expect, theoretically, when Venus trine Jupiter, that things really would come together. It's a time of happiness, of luck, of good ideas. I mean, we shouldn't forget that this Venus trine Jupiter is in air signs. It's a bit different from, say, if it was in water signs. So Venus trine Jupiter in water signs is perhaps going to be more focus on the emotional side of luck, people getting together on an emotional level. But Venus trine Jupiter may be more about ideas. Though with Venus trine Jupiter, it may be too much of a good thing. It may be that we're too optimistic, too complacent. We may, perhaps live in the present. If we want something, we want to do something. Great time to, have an expensive meal or buy something nice on Amazon. But what does it cost? Venus trine Jupiter might not worry about the cost at the time. And in terms of treating other people, how are we going to deal with other people? We may be too optimistic. We may assume that, of all possibilities, we're going to see the best possibility. We might not forget that some people are nicer than others, and just because we treat someone nicely doesn't mean to say that they'll treat us nicely in return. So I think we need to be aware of a little bit of complacency there with that Venus trine Jupiter. But towards the end of a weekend, we do get a grand trine because the moon will move to a trine of Venus, trine of Jupiter. Okay, if you are in Australia or New Zealand, I'll be looking at a Sydney chart in a moment, but at some stage during a weekend, or perhaps into Monday, you're going to have moon trine Venus, moon trine Jupiter, Venus trine Jupiter. So you're going to have a grand trine in air signs. And, that should be nice. Perhaps this weekend or into Monday, it is a great time for ideas and how we use our ideas, and also just for general communication. It is a great time for communicating. So that's the broad picture. Now let me just quickly look at the Sydney chart. So this is the same chart, the beginning of a weekend, the middle of a weekend, midnight on Sunday the 15th, but instead of being set for New York, I'm setting it for Sydney, Australia. And so what you see is on Sunday, again, this is for Sydney, the moon is at 3 degrees Aquarius. So what this means is that, for most of Saturday, if you're in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, the moon is going to be in Capricorn. And it's not until, maybe late, it depends where you are exactly, but late afternoon, early evening on Saturday that the moon does move into Aquarius. And so there is a slight change of emphasis there, so how you experience Sunday is going to be perhaps more about, how you experience Saturday if you're in Australia or New Zealand is going to be more perhaps about late Capricorn. But by the time you hit Sunday, the moon is most certainly in Aquarius. Now that grand trine that I was talking about is going to be more about maybe Monday morning. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's perhaps not going to be about this weekend, because you can see that the moon has got 16 degrees to go. So 16 degrees to go. So that would, off the top of my head, would be sort of early Monday morning when that moon trine Venus, moon trine Jupiter becomes exact. But doesn't take away from the fact that we've got a Venus trine Jupiter this weekend. Certainly the main aspect, main thing going on, and it doesn't really matter whether you're in Australia or California or New Zealand. We're all going to experience this trine between Venus and Jupiter. So let me now look at the overall positions of the planets from a heliocentric view, just in case we might see a different emphasis here. So here is the positions of the planets if we make the Sun the center of the solar system, where of course it is. And so heliocentrically, Venus has just gone into Sagittarius, heliocentrically, not geocentrically, heliocentrically, and it's starting to make a sextile aspect to Pluto, and that's probably the main thing going on. Venus sextile Pluto. I mean, it's quite a gentle influence, Venus sextile Pluto. It is perhaps about power and how we assert ourselves and how we influence people, and how perhaps we use our feelings to get our way. I mean, that is possible. And some of us might feel it's a good time to be gently manipulative, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. What I would be concerned about with this heliocentric chart is the positions of Uranus and Mars. You can see there is a Uranus-Mars conjunction over the weekend. Now, remember, July the 15th was when we had a geocentric Uranus-Mars conjunction, I think. But remember that that's when Trump was shot on the 13th. Now, the heliocentric Mars-Uranus conjunction is happening, 2 months later. So that shows there is a difference between a geocentric and a heliocentric systems, and we may feel that Mars-Uranus conjunction. I don't think it's going to be necessarily as personal as the geocentric Mars-Uranus conjunction, but I think it may reflect in what is happening in the world out there, what we're seeing, kind of events we get. It might be a good idea to look at the news and look at the Earth. The Earth is at 23 Pisces, and the Earth is moving towards a sextile with Uranus-Mars. Okay, that sextile won't be exact until early next week, but still it adds to the power of Mars-Uranus. In fact, if we actually look at it, so if you look at, sorry, I've sort of missed out stuff here, haven't I? We've got, you can see that the Earth is trine Mercury this weekend. That's potentially quite an important aspect. It does facilitate communication, it's true, but also if you look at what's happening, that's at noon. So as Mercury goes on through Sunday, you're likely to see Mars and Uranus on the Earth Mercury midpoint. So I think that could be significant. So I think that this weekend, there could be events of a Mars-Uranus nature, not just a weekend, but probably into early next week. So we need to look out for that Mars-Uranus. And I think because it's heliocentric, as I've already suggested, it's possibly going to be less personal, more about what we see in terms of the collective, in terms of groups, countries, and, wherever you've got a war zone with a Mars-Uranus conjunction, be extra careful or be extra observant. So Gaza, Ukraine, the usual suspects, those are places we really do have to watch out for. Okay, so I'm now going to look at today from the perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the weekend of September the 14th and 15th, 2024, for all 12 signs. Aries. Aries, I think that things are moving. You feel that there is just flow, and the world around you over the weekend is kind of moving your way. You don't have to necessarily be directly participating, but I think that you can enjoy whatever is happening, and I think that you're going to have a certain sort of happiness and enthusiasm, and I think in many cases you'll be able to enjoy other people's company, and that is because Venus is making a trine to Jupiter. So Venus is in Libra. Venus is in your opposite sign of Libra. It's been there for some time. It stays in Libra until I think September the 23rd. So that says something about other people and their state of mind. Venus is very, very well placed right now. It's in mutual reception by exaltation of Saturn. It's in Libra. And now it's making that trine to Jupiter. So wonderful Venus. And that means that some of the people around you can be wonderful, can make really good company. But that doesn't mean to say that they're going to do things your way. Venus is strong. And that does mean that the people close to you are strong. Perhaps stronger than usual. And perhaps less willing to compromise. And so, that's another reason why you don't need to be a super active player. Maybe this is a time when you can let other people take the initiative. See what ideas they've got. Perhaps you can take advantage of these ideas. Perhaps, you can allow yourself to be carried along to some extent. I mean, obviously you don't want to be carried along too much, but I think that there are social benefits there, and if you are socializing, if you're meeting people, I think that really things should work very well. But when I was looking at the heliocentric picture, I did notice that Mars is making an exact conjunction to Uranus. So Mars is you. Mars is conjunct Uranus. So as an Aries, you may pick up on that energy to some extent and find that, if you're not careful, that you might get yourself involved in things that you really needn't be getting involved in, perhaps because you're finding it too easy or just too natural to just be overly assertive or to be in too much of a hurry, and then things could get difficult. And okay, it's possible that you might be somewhat accident prone over the weekend with Mars conjunct Uranus, but I think if you're aware of what you're doing, this is unnecessary. So don't create trouble, don't rock the boat unless it is really necessary. So it's just important to let things flow naturally, and that's usually the key to harmony, the key to not having any trouble. There is a way in which things should move. You let things move, and you don't try and force them, and then things are okay. I suppose. Yesterday I was talking about snakes, and I talked about Steve Irwin and him and snakes, and I suppose if you want to be a successful snake handler, you have to understand the snake, don't you? And I suppose you have to understand the way the snake moves and not try to make assumptions about the snake and not try to do things that are unnatural, like pick snakes up. And perhaps it's the same thing this weekend. You perhaps have to be a little bit of a snake handler, allowing things to move in their own way, allowing the animal impulses all around you to go their own way, to do things naturally, and then no one gets hurt, no one gets bitten. It's just when you try to force things that there is trouble. But there's no need for it. If you just let things happen in their own way without feeling that you always have to assert yourself, that you always have to make your own presence and personality felt, that is just so unnecessary. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think you understand the nature of the times, and I do perhaps need to mention that Mars, which is your ruler, is square the nodal axis, and Mars square node, there is, I think, a temptation to sort of go back to form, and I think this perhaps reinforces a point I was just making. You may feel a great need to assert yourself, but perhaps to assert yourself because it's Mars in Cancer in a way that may be a little bit clumsy. And I mean, this is so unnecessary, as I've been trying to say. It's not about you this weekend. If you want a successful weekend, it can't be about you. About you trying to make things happen your way. It's just not going to work. On the other hand, as I've been saying in this piece about Aries, if you just understand the nature of things, and you understand the nature of other people, and you understand that in many respects other people are in a stronger position than you, and they're also quite stubborn in their own, if you push them. So if you really try to force someone to do things your way, they're going to react, and that would be a shame. So yeah, there is a possibility that you mess this weekend up, but I just think it's completely unnecessary. I think it's really up to you. So if you want to have a great weekend, you can certainly have a great weekend, and just don't feel that you have to always be taking the initiative. Taurus, Venus is trine Jupiter, and this is great news. And this means that Venus, which is your ruler, is in an absolutely wonderful position. You could argue that Venus is potentially in the best position it is all year. It's like that. And so, let me explain why Venus is so strong. I mean, I suppose you might already know, but Venus is in Libra, its own sign. It's in mutual reception by exaltation with Saturn. If you take a point system, William Lilly in Christian astrology, he has a point system. So he would give Venus plus 5 points for being in its own sign. He would give it another 4 points for being in mutual reception by exaltation with Saturn, and he would give it extra points for being trine to Jupiter, because Jupiter is a benefic. And so in every way, Venus is strong, and I'm hoping that means that you are strong as well. And the only issue with Venus, the only possible reason why Venus might be a little bit weak, is the fact that it's in the same sign as the South Node. That's the only downer on Venus, but it's not an exact conjunction with the South Node. So I'm hoping that you're really going to be able to make the most of your strengths, and you are a nice person, people are going to like you, and you're going to, I hope, just understand what's happening around you, and through that understanding, things really should really start to move. Now, the moon is moving through Aquarius, and with the moon moving through Aquarius, okay, if you're in Australia and New Zealand, that's more about Sunday. But if you're in Americas, Western Europe, or Europe in general, or in Africa, I think basically you can regard the whole weekend as the moon being in Aquarius. So from a Taurian perspective, with the moon in Aquarius, I think you have a sense of possibility. What is possible? What can happen? In a positive sense. What are the opportunities here? If you do everything right, where are you going to end up going? And I'm hoping that many Taurians are going to actually have a strong sense of direction, and this moon in Aquarius is going to feed into the Venus Jupiter at the end of the weekend or into Monday, because the moon is starting to make a trine to Venus, and that trine will be exact late Sunday into Monday, depending on where you are, and that is going to be fortunate in terms of you making decisions, and I think you actually can make very good decisions. And once you make up your mind, you'll be able to say, okay, I understand the world. I've made up my mind. I know in which direction I am moving. So that looks good. And of course, the moon in the end creates a grand trine in air signs: moon trine Venus, moon trine Jupiter. So that certainly looks good. Now, from a Taurian perspective, this Venus trine Jupiter may have a material dimension. It is fun, that's true, and you can have a fun weekend and you can enjoy yourself, and I think you'll know how to enjoy yourself, and you will have a spontaneous enthusiasm that will be appreciated, but within certain limits. I think that you are going to understand that certain things have to be done in certain ways, and in terms of money and material things, I think that you're going to be luckier than average with Venus trine Jupiter. Remembering that Venus is not just your ruler, it is a universal significator of money. And so this brings us on to the two-sided nature of Venus trine Jupiter. It's about making money. It can also be about spending money, because it's a nice aspect, Venus trine Jupiter, but it can be an excessive aspect. And so over the weekend, do watch expenditure. You might feel that you're somehow allowed to spend money this weekend, and that would be because Venus trine Jupiter is maybe changing your cognitions. Some of your concerns might go. You might feel, yes, you can afford it, or it's the right thing to do. Let's live for the moment. That's very nice, but you don't want to go too far. And at the same time, Venus is conjunct the South Node, and okay, it's widely conjunct the South Node. But Venus conjunct the South Node in the same sign, that it may be that you're very good at putting things together, but you may be putting things together in a way that kind of reflects the past. So, in fact, you could be very good at recreating the past this weekend, because it maybe feels more secure. But I think that it is the South Node. That's the line of least resistance. You do have to think about the opposite side of things. The North Node in Aries. Somehow you have to be able to deal with situations that are a little bit fuzzy, where you don't know where the lines lie, where you don't know where the boundaries lie, and you need to be able to deal with a bit of uncertainty and not have everything completely carefully planned. And in this light, Mars is making a square to your nodal axis, and it may just be that if you try to plan things too carefully, you may do a beautiful job of it, but someone else might have other ideas, and in an instant will just say, no, that's not how they want it to work. So don't overplan things, because if you overplan things, I think you'd be perhaps spoiling Venus trine Uranus, Venus trine Jupiter. But I must emphasize that it is a good weekend with this Venus trine Jupiter, and also remember the heliocentric position picture. We got Venus sextile Pluto, and so heliocentrically with Venus sextile Pluto, there is an indication there that you have your own charm and you have your own charisma, and I think that people will listen to you, and if you listen to them, they'll listen to you. And so, overall this weekend, it does seem that things are moving, and if you take a fairly relaxed approach, I think that it looks like being quite a lucky weekend. Gemini, Jupiter has been moving through your sign for some time, since the end of May, and overall, that's a good thing. Jupiter's a planet of good luck, moving through your sign. That's good. And what we have this weekend is we have Venus making a trine to Jupiter, and it's a really nice trine. And also we've got the moon moving into Aquarius, so it's getting a lot of emphasis on air signs, and Gemini is an air sign. So we've actually got a grand trine in air signs coming up late on Sunday into Monday. And because you are an air sign, I think that you really can benefit from this situation. I think that you're going to feel that things really are moving, that you can make things happen your way, and I think you're going to have some great ideas, and you certainly should not underestimate your fundamental creativity with Venus trine Jupiter. And you've got so much to offer. You've got special talents, talents which are completely obvious to you, and I suppose being able to make the most of your talents. I think your talent is very much a sociable. It's quite a sociable thing. There is a sociable connection here in terms of your talent, and I suppose what talent is about, it might have a sort of a performance side to it. By that I mean, you have something you can do really well, and you perhaps have an audience, and the audience can be perhaps entertained by you. They can appreciate what you're doing as an external action, but they can also appreciate you as a person who can really make special things happen. And I think it's actually quite a good time to be reflecting on your creativity, but also reflecting on how your creativity is appreciated by the outside world, by other people, by the people you're in contact with. And so you kind of have to love yourself, but without being arrogant, without being precious about it. It's like you've got a gift, and so give freely of that gift, and I suppose don't really overthink it. I don't think there's any need to overthink it, and at the same time you are performing on your terms. It's very important to remember that. But although you're performing on your terms, do think about the audience. And it's not about you getting praise from the audience, your ego being given a boost from the audience. It's just that your capacity to entertain is strong, and if you can entertain and if you can make people happy, that would be really good. And enthusiasm matters. Sometimes Geminis can be completely unenthusiastic. You know me, Sun in Gemini. I can be pretty unenthusiastic. I can pour cold water on things. I'm quite good at that. But try to play down that aspect of your nature. I'm trying to be as enthusiastic as possible right now as I record my readings of the 12 signs, because I'm trying to make the most of Venus trine Jupiter. I mean, in the end, I suppose at the end of this video, I'll be looking in detail about Venus trine Jupiter, and I'll be showing that maybe it's not as great as it's cut up to be, that it can actually in certain cases be quite negative, but that's just me, don't worry about that. So it is important in general to be as positive as you can, and you are on show, and you do want to show the world what you can do, and you want to be able to surprise people, and I think today you can surprise people, and surprise people I think in a good way, showing people perhaps aspects of your personality they haven't seen before, or telling things people they don't know, or showing things to people, and generally expanding their horizons. And that is something you really can do. You can move people along, and I think as you move through the weekend, as you move into Monday, it's this ability does get stronger. And yeah, it's about doing it your way, but also doing it your way in such a way that doesn't conflict with the people around you. So you don't want to compromise. That's important. It's not about compromising. It's absolutely not. But perhaps you've got different sides to you, to who you are, different sides to your creative potential, and perhaps you need to perhaps give people the side they maybe want to see, the side they're going to appreciate the most. And what is that side? Well, it's a side to you that can be optimistic. Yeah, Geminis can be. They can be very negative, but do try to focus on your optimism, and then you will get a virtuous circle. As you emanate optimistic vibes, you get optimistic vibes back, and then you feel better, you can feel more optimistic, other people are going to be more optimistic. And if that's how a grand trine works, things move faster and faster and faster. And so I think I'm quite optimistic about it. Yes, I'm optimistic, Gemini, for your weekend. Cancer, it may be that the weekend takes a little bit of time to get going. And, the reason being is that there's a sign change. The moon moves from Capricorn to Aquarius. And, when the moon was in Capricorn, Capricorn, your opposite sign, it just felt that, you had work to do perhaps with other people. You understood maybe the social dimension, and you were sort of getting used to it. But then the moon moves from Capricorn into Aquarius, and now that move, will take place over the course of Saturday. So taking place very early in the day if you're in the Americas, sort of even in Europe in the morning. But okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it probably won't happen until late on Saturday. But one way or another, the moon moves from Capricorn to Aquarius, and the moon moving into Aquarius is a change. I think that you perhaps in the first instance become a little less sociable and a little more thoughtful and maybe a little more cautious. You can feel things more, and you can feel that things may not be entirely straightforward, and you may want to dwell on your emotions and your sensitivities, and that's okay, because it is a sense of, realignment. But the moon is moving towards a trine of Jupiter and a trine of Venus. And, okay, it's slowly getting there. It's over the course of Sunday and into Monday. And I think with that movement movement to Venus and Jupiter, I think you're going to start to feel better as the weekend progresses. Just more confident, more optimistic, but still not entirely in the mood for being out and about. Being perhaps more introverted than usual, perhaps wanting to do things your way and at your own pace. And actually, I think that's okay. I don't think you want to be pushed or pressured. And I don't think that pressure actually exists, or to any great extent. And so if you do things your way, but in a constructive sense, I think it's just important, Cancer, that you can cultivate a sense of quiet optimism, that you just feel that you're in the right place, you've got the sort of requisite level of distance. I think a bit of distance this weekend is important, and just a sort of a confidence that things are slowly moving, and you're able to understand things, particularly late on Sunday, understand things that perhaps in the past you hadn't got to grips with, perhaps because you hadn't wanted to get to grips with. But now that you're grappling with information and what's happening in the world, it's starting to make sense. And maybe when you give something another look, something that seemed to be a little bit of a problem may actually be something that you can soon enough take advantage of. So I do think that is something quite fortunate. And you shouldn't feel that you are at all threatened. And I think there's a danger that perhaps if you're too defensive, you might sort of miss out on some opportunities, because you're quite capable of looking after yourself. Mars is moving through early Cancer, and in fact Mars is moving through early Cancer, and it is square the North Node and square the South Node, and you need to get the balance right there. And I think that it's about looking after your own interests, but not taking things too far. You don't have to obsess about control. And I just think you could obsess about control with Mars making a square to the North Node, and perhaps feeling that it is just best to err on the side of caution, because you want to go to the places where you know that you're in control, but that in the process you can miss out on things. And just because something is complicated doesn't mean you should stay away from it, because, as I said, you are quite capable of looking after yourself. So it is a weekend, Cancer, where you do have a lot of choice, but I would just suggest that you look after yourself, but don't be obsessed with looking after yourself. Don't be too defensive, because if you were to be too defensive, in fact, if you're too defensive, you could actually be offensive. That is actually possible. But if you're too defensive, you might spoil your luck. And I think that you do have a certain amount of luck this weekend, and particularly late in the weekend when the moon starts moving towards a trine of Venus and Jupiter. Leo, you can feel that things certainly are moving. You get a sense of momentum over the weekend. It's not just you that's moving. It just seems that other people are moving, events are moving, and you've probably got quite a lot to say about it, but you don't necessarily need to say too much. I mean, you don't have to analyze it at least too much. And, with Venus making a trine to Jupiter, that does mean, I think, that your social skills are going to be good, and perhaps very good, and you are going to be able to tell people about yourself, explain yourself, and you are going to want to make sure, though, that you understand everything. Now, perhaps here's the problem. The sun is in Virgo. The sun is your ruler. It's in Virgo, and as we know, Virgo is quite an analytical sign, and there is a possibility that you analyze things just a little too much. So if something good happens, or if there's a possibility of something good happening, you might start to look at it and ask questions. And if you ask too many questions, you may undermine the very thing that you're analyzing. And there may be a certain place for taking things as they are. So if, for example, someone makes a suggestion, if it's a harmless suggestion, I mean, not a suggestion that requires taking risks, but if someone makes a suggestion and you just analyze it to death, sure, you're going to be quite capable of undermining the suggestion, demonstrating that it's a ridiculous idea, but you may be destroying something that's good. So resist the temptation, Leo, to overanalyze, and perhaps instead, try to look at the broad picture. If it looks good, it probably is good. And okay, it might need a little bit of fine-tuning, but if you pick at things, which is, it's not like you, Leo. It's not what you're about, but just at the moment, you might be tempted to pick at things because the sun is in Virgo. And I'm not saying anything derogatory about Virgo. It just might be, just at the moment, that might be something you could do, particularly as the sun is actually relatively close to a sun-squared Jupiter. Sun-squared Jupiter can excessively pick at things until there is nothing left. And, there is, yes, a sense of optimism today, but from your perspective, Leo, there is this realism in the background, just seeing the world for what it is, and you're very aware of restrictions and what could hold you back, and I do think that could spoil things. And so, if possible, try to err on the side of optimism and not be overly analytical, not be overly pessimistic, and also with the moon is in Aquarius. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, on Saturday it may be in Capricorn, but in the end the moon gets into Aquarius, and the moon in Aquarius does eventually make these really nice aspects to Venus and Jupiter, late Sunday into Monday. And so with the moon in Aquarius, I think that you can benefit from other people, and you have to understand that other people have their way of doing things, and I don't think that in the first instance you should try too hard to question them. You ask too many questions, they get annoyed, and it can spoil things. And perhaps in the first instance, Leo, you should let other people take the initiative. See where they want to go, see what they're so interested in, and it may be that in the end you are pleasantly surprised. Virgo, it's a weekend that certainly looks good. It certainly looks good to a lot of people. And from a Virgo perspective, you might have your doubts. You might be thinking, well, what is it all about? And why perhaps are some people happier than other people? Indeed, maybe why are some people happier than you? I mean, that might be how you see things. And, from your view, there are things to be done, and too much enjoyment may seem to be a little bit of a waste of time, maybe even a waste of money as well. And so, if anyone is the killjoy this weekend, it could be you, because I don't think you're quite prepared to enter into the sort of rather optimistic atmosphere of the weekend. Because when you have a situation like this, when you've got a lot of people who are optimistic and enthusiastic, you have a kind of a collective process where someone is cast as the outsider, as the critic maybe, as someone who looks at what might go wrong. And maybe you this weekend are being cast in this particular role. Someone's got to do it. I suppose you could say it's like, when people go to the pub to get drunk, there's just someone who doesn't drink because some people need to be driven home. And maybe that's you. And as a Virgo, I think you perhaps understand that role. I'm not talking about it literally, or maybe it could be the case, but someone has to be sane. Someone has to be asking questions. Someone has to be, whispering in the king's ear. You are mortal. Isn't that how it works in classical times? You had someone just reminding the king that he was mortal, that nothing lasts forever. And so when you see all this sort of enthusiasm and optimism, and perhaps other people making plans, it's you perhaps that has to ask questions. And I think that, Virgo, you are capable of shaking things up a bit. You can say things that people weren't expecting, that people hadn't allowed for. And through the things you say, you can actually cause, I would have said, quite a lot of change. And you can make people listen to you. And I really do think they will listen to you. After all, Virgo, Virgo's ruler is Mercury. Mercury is well placed, and it is in Virgo. You certainly know how to communicate. You know how to make your point. And Virgo, I just don't think that you're going to be swept up in this rather sort of over-optimistic atmosphere where people don't really think too much about the future. So you are able to maintain your sanity. And at the same time, Virgo, I'm confident that you are able to look after your own interests very well. There is this aspect between Venus and Jupiter, and there are many ways in which Venus trine Jupiter can work. Okay, Venus trine Jupiter can be about excess, but I think for you, this Venus trine Jupiter is about really good management, having a clear sense of what you would like to happen, and being able to actually make it happen. And you can make it happen not perhaps by being mindlessly optimistic, but instead by asking questions, by thinking deeply, perhaps about what can go wrong. Maybe that's the starting point. Now, sometimes you've got great plans, great ideas, and the great ideas are absolutely certain to work, provided nothing goes wrong, but you know that something will always go wrong. So the heart of a great idea isn't the positive stuff, but it's the negative stuff. It's how you manage it when things don't go to plan. And if you can address the negative sides of an idea, look at how the idea might be frustrated, then you're actually supporting the overall idea. You can allow perhaps yourself to be optimistic if you've considered the downside. And so in many respects, Virgo, you are perhaps this weekend the sanest and most balanced of the 12 signs. Libra. Venus is in a fantastic position. Venus is in your sign. It's in mutual reception to Saturn by exaltation, and Venus is trine Jupiter. So, as far as I can see, that looks really good. And I think that many people will be saying, or if you look at what people are saying for Libra at the moment, they're probably incredibly enthusiastic about it. And I will join that enthusiasm. It can be an absolutely great weekend for you when a lot of things can go your way. So I have to say, put yourself in a position where you can take advantage of everything. You can't expect much to happen if you spend your whole weekend up a tree. I mean, the only thing that could happen is you might fall off a tree. But aside from that, nothing much is going to happen. So do make sure, Libra, that you are out and about, that you're available, that you are thinking, that you are talking, that if an opportunity exists, then maybe you should take that opportunity. And if good luck is going to go your way, then now might be the chance. I suppose if you want to be experimental about it, spending. This is experimental, by the way. I mean, I'm not suggesting you could do this. So logically, if it's a lucky weekend, then maybe you should, I don't know, buy a lottery ticket. It's a waste. You're going to lose the money, by the way. If you buy a lottery ticket, you will for certain lose your money. But I suppose the thing about buying a lottery ticket is that, I don't know, I don't buy lottery tickets, but they cost $1 or $2, and you've got a zero chance of winning, or at least winning the big prize. But there's no opportunity of winning a big prize if you don't do the lottery ticket. So maybe, Libra, as an experiment, you could buy a lottery ticket this weekend, if there is a lottery ticket this weekend. Just as an experiment. You will lose your money, almost certainly. But just let's see how Venus trine Jupiter works. And I mean that perhaps as a metaphor there, buying the lottery ticket. You don't necessarily literally have to buy the lottery ticket, but you have to put yourself in a position where good luck can come your way. So, for example, I don't know what your priorities are. So, for example, if you're feeling lonesome and you want a new relationship, then if you stay at home with your phone turned off, then can you expect much to happen? No, you have to put yourself somewhere where something good can happen. So whatever good things you would like to happen, you have to place yourself, and you have to make that possibility make that possibility real, because good luck is not going to be presented to you on a plate. You have to be proactive. And so Libra, it can be a really good weekend, but what good luck hates is people taking it for granted. Jupiter and Venus, they are wonderful planets, but they don't like being taken for granted. You have to do everything you can to make the good luck happen. And once you've put in the effort and you've finished whatever you need to do, then just forget about it. So that's perhaps how good luck works. You put a lot of energy into it. When you've done all you can, you forget about it and you assume it's not going to work. So you start off perhaps with positive thinking, and then you move towards negative thinking. You allow perhaps the magic to start working. Maybe, I don't know. But I think that just emphasizes the point that you just... You don't want to waste this weekend. And I think that, as the weekend progresses, Libra, things should just get better. The moon is in Aquarius. We've actually got a grand trine in air signs by the end of the weekend, because we've got Venus in Libra, trine Jupiter in Gemini, and the moon is in Aquarius. And the moon is in, a fun sector of your chart. It's all about enjoying yourself, being creative, being yourself. In certain situations, it can be about romance, if that's a priority. So overall, it does look like being a good weekend where you also have a lot of power, the power to make things happen, and also to be dynamically assertive. And you can bring to bear the full essence of who you are in terms of pushing it out onto the outside world, and people actually listening to you and focusing on you and accepting that your way is the best way. And so, Libra, I don't think there's anything more to be said. We don't really want to analyze the situation too closely, because if you analyze good fortune too much, you might lose that good fortune. So my message is, take advantage of the weekend and do whatever you can to increase your chances of ultimate success. Scorpio, you may feel a little bit out of sync with whatever is going on around you. It might just feel that it's not quite you, but it's not really your kind of world. And you perhaps feel that questions need to be asked, that if people are being over enthusiastic, at least you will see it as being overly enthusiastic, you may be wondering, well, what is the point? And you may feel that you just don't want to partake. And if that's the way you feel, then I suppose that's okay. And probably through Saturday, most of Sunday, that may be the right approach. You have things to do, and you want to make sure that you're feeling comfortable and secure, and you may even be a little bit defensive, but don't try to preach or try to tell people that they're being irresponsible, or telling them what they should be doing, what they should not be doing. That won't be appreciated, and I don't think you'll make your mark. So in a social situation, or where there are people around you, perhaps family members around you or friends, whatever, don't overestimate your own power and influence. People may not listen to you if they don't like what you have to say. And, your advice might be ignored for better or for worse. And perhaps what you should be doing, Scorpio, is trying to understand what other people are excited about, because there are certain things that they are excited about. You may not understand it, but maybe you can understand it, and perhaps you need to listen and listen to what people have to say, and consider the possibility that other people know more than you. At least this weekend, they know more than you. They may be more confident than you. They may have an insight that you don't have, and they can do their thing. You can do your thing. You don't have to join them. And in fact, Scorpio, if you're completely left alone and you don't have to deal with anyone, I actually think it can be a relatively good weekend. You can do what you feel is important, and Mars, your ruler, is square the north and south node. So with that Mars square the north and south node, I think you're going to feel a great need to do something, do anything. Well, you want to do something, but not anything. And there is a difference here. Doing anything is just activity for the sake of activity. You feel you need to do you need to do any activity, and if you do any activity, that could be worse than useless, because you might just cause a lot of trouble. Instead, you should do something that's important to you. Do it, give it everything you've got, and it may just be by doing something that is a bit repetitive, but it's also something that needs to be done. That allows you to focus, not just focus on the task itself, but to perhaps focus on who you are and what you might be able to achieve. And you might just get some insights, and these insights may be about yourself, and it might be about the world in which you're living. Now, one thing I should mention, Scorpio, is that this weekend there is a heliocentric conjunction between Mars and Uranus. And this Mars-Uranus heliocentric conjunction could be quite serious. I mean, it is a little bit destabilizing, and it may make you impatient, and you may be impatient of other people and kind of annoyed that you can't influence them and you're not being listened to. I think it's very important that you don't get annoyed. You're not center stage, and you're not really in a position where you really have a great deal of influence. And so do accept this situation and perhaps find a channel for your energy, a constructive channel for this energy of Mars conjunct Uranus, because Mars-Uranus conjunctions can be quite destructive. They can encourage you to do things which are dangerous, which can cause arguments. People are stubborn. You're not going to influence people. If you try to influence people, then, okay, you can influence people in a way that they're comfortable with. But if you're trying to do something, if you're trying to tell someone to do something that they want to do, but you don't want them to do, then that could be a recipe for trouble. So understand the Mars conjunct Uranus, observe it in yourself, but be careful how it manifests, because it would be a shame if you got angry, got annoyed, just felt you had to behave in a hasty and ultimately futile way. You just get yourself into trouble, you may get other people into trouble, and in the process you could also be undermining your reputation, because Mars is square the nodal axis. Nodal axis can be about reputation, and so do consider, Scorpio, how people are looking at you. Or maybe I don't think they are looking at you. You may not be the most important person in the world this weekend, but if you try to impose yourself onto other people and try to get people to do things their way, it just could come over as being just rather clumsy. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, there is a trine between Venus and Jupiter. I have been talking about this trine between Venus and Jupiter, over the last few days, and I take the view that this trine between Venus and Jupiter is almost certainly fortunate, at least from a Sagittarian perspective, because Jupiter is your ruler, and Venus is making a favourable aspect to Jupiter, and Venus is the lesser benefic. Jupiter is the greater benefic. So, there's no reason why things can't go your way, and why there shouldn't be, real movement today. And as far as your social life is concerned, I do think that things look really good. You can get lots of attention. I think you're going to come over as being dynamic, but at the same time, you're going to have the good sense to understand other people and perhaps understand their needs and understand what they want to do. And there certainly are things that they want to do. And so, I'm looking at a spider. There's a spider on my camera. I think it's a spider. It looks happy. But I don't know whether that means anything for Sagittarians, the fact that there's a spider walking on my camera. I mean, it's not a very big spider, and it not being Australia, the spider is not dangerous. But, spiders are lucky, aren't they? So maybe I'm just feeding that to you. When I was in psychotherapy a long time ago, my psychotherapist, he said that when you tell someone about your dream, that dream becomes their dream as well. So I suppose when I'm talking about the spider, that it's your spider as well. So that emphasizes the point, Sagittarius, that maybe it's going to be a lucky weekend, and so don't spoil the weekend by getting worried about your luck. There's no room for excessive arachnophobia. Don't be phobic about things that could be lucky for you, and so things are happening, and it's people that matter. People can be so useful, and Jupiter has been in Gemini, in your opposite sign, since the end of May, and so with Jupiter in Gemini, it's you can very much benefit through others, and through others you can realize your potential. So if you are totally focused on yourself, then where is the luck? How can the luck manifest? But if you are with others, if you're relating to other people, then since the end of May, that's kind of where your luck lies. But now, this weekend, we got Venus trine Jupiter. And so with Venus trine Jupiter, really do consider everything around you, particularly the social opportunities and what people have to offer, what they have to say, because I think it all really does matter. And at the same time, you have got a lot to say, and I think there are places you want to go to, and so it might actually be a good weekend for a fair amount of short distance traveling, moving from one place to another place, moving from one opportunity to another opportunity. I suppose that traveling needn't be physical. It could be, I don't know, making phone calls or visiting different places on the internet. I mean, it's up to you. It depends on your situation. But the moon, as the weekend progresses, it starts to move towards a trine with Venus and Jupiter. And of course, the moon trine Jupiter is particularly important because Jupiter is your ruler. And so we get this grand trine situation by the end of a weekend where everything is in a 120-degree aspect to everything else. So moon trine Venus, Venus trine Jupiter, moon trine Venus. It all works very nicely. So Sagittarius, things are moving. I think that it's not a weekend for being alone. I think it's a weekend for seeing your luck, for observing your luck, and perhaps, going back to the spider analogy, it may be that something that you are slightly afraid of is actually the key to your future good fortune. I mean, that is possible. Capricorn, I think it looks like being a good weekend. I'm not saying it's necessarily going to be a wild weekend, but I believe that things overall should go your way in a fairly natural and organic way. I think, for example, that you're going to have a good sense of who you are and where you're going to, and also what needs to be done. And there is this trine aspect between Venus and Jupiter. Now, on the surface, you might think, well, Venus trine Jupiter, it's a nice aspect, but how does it affect Capricorn? Well, the reason it affects Capricorn, for a start, is because Venus is in mutual reception to Saturn by exaltation. So Venus, as I've been saying almost ad nauseam, Venus and Saturn are in mutual reception by exaltation. I'm sorry, I'm starting to get a bit boring with that, but it does really help you. And at the moment, it's like, I know that Saturn is your ruler, but at the moment, Venus is kind of your ruler as well because of that mutual reception. And so Venus is trine Jupiter, so actually that makes you lucky. It gives you good fortune, but it gives you good fortune in quite a focused kind of way. It's a kind of good fortune that may relate to your overall direction. You have a clear sense, actually, of where you want to go. And also you have a clear sense of what you need to do in order to get to where you want to go to. So it's not just that you've got some sort of vague ambition. You also have a sense of what needs to be done. Yeah, and I know it's the weekend, but don't let that hold you back. Just because other people are slowing down or other people are just focusing on mindless enjoyment doesn't mean that you have to completely join the party. You can do things your way, but in a way that doesn't make you seem unusual or odd or being a spoilsport. No, you don't. You can act in a way that people understand and appreciate, but at the same time you can be an individual, and you're going to, I think, be able to do things this weekend that do relate to your ambitions and the whole way in which your ambitions are structured. And a little bit of hard work on your part is going to bring, I think, big results. So you put in a little bit and you get quite a lot out. So even if you can't spend the whole weekend working or organizing yourself, it doesn't matter. Just 5 minutes could make a big difference. And things are just going to run very easily and move quickly. And I don't know if money is important to you, but if money is important to you, then over the weekend, I think that things could really quite come together. And not in the sense necessarily of, dollar bills falling from heaven, not quite like that, but being able to create a situation where in the near future you're going to be able to financially benefit, and it should be quite straightforward. And Capricorn, I think it's quite good this weekend also, because you're going to be able to have a public life and a private life, and they won't seem to clash with each other. They'll seem to just merge into each other, and people won't be wondering where you are, or feeling that you're being antisocial, because you're going to be around, but at the same time you're going to be able to make time for yourself. And so Capricorn, I think overall it looks like being a very constructive weekend. And also I think you're going to be quietly optimistic. You're not going to shout about how wonderful the world is and how wonderful your prospects are. That's not the Capricorn way. But I think you're going to have a quiet optimism that things really are moving your way. Aquarius. So the moon is in Aquarius. The moon moves into Aquarius if you're in the UK at 8:53 a.m. on Saturday, or that would be 9:53 a.m. if you're in continental Europe. And if you're in the Americas, the moon will move into Aquarius, very early in the morning on Saturday. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon won't move into Aquarius until late on Saturday, but it doesn't matter. We can say wherever you are that it is a moon in Aquarius weekend, and you're going to have a sense of your own independence, and where the boundary between yourself and others actually lies. And this is your domain, and this is someone else's domain, and the distinction is going to be clear. And I don't think you're going to have to defend your boundaries or anything like that. I think it's just going to be just very easy, and you can do things your way, but also in a way that just people like you. And you're helped by the fact that there is this trine between Venus and Jupiter. So this trine between Venus and Jupiter is important for Aquarians, because Venus is in Libra, air sign, Jupiter is in Gemini, an air sign, and of course Aquarius is the third air sign, so you get the trine, and the moon is going to be picking up on this trine. In fact, by the end of the weekend, we have a grand trine in air signs, with Moon, Venus and Jupiter forming this triangular relationship to one another. And I do think that is tremendously fortunate, and things really can start to move, and you can just feel that you're in a place where you can be yourself and do something that is of lasting value. And I think that you probably have all the resources you need. I don't think that you need to spend any time trying to gather new ideas, new concepts, reworking the fundamentals of your creative self-expression. You don't have to do that. Your basic philosophy is sound as it is, and there's always more work to be done, but I think if you just trust yourself to get it right and to be yourself, then I really don't think that you've got anything to worry about. And you're helped by the fact that you just have a fundamental optimism to yourself. To you. It's not an optimism that you have to discuss. It's Capricorn has the same thing, because there are similarities between Capricorn and Aquarius, because they're both ruled by Saturn. And looking at Saturn at the moment, remembering that Saturn is in mutual reception to Venus by exaltation, there is a fundamental optimism to you, which I think is particularly strong this weekend. You just know that it's going to turn out okay. Just that quiet feeling. You don't have to spend ages just explaining it. It just feels right. And because things feel right, that just encourages you to continue in the direction you're going. And yeah, by and large, you've got it right. And you don't have to spend time looking for confirmation, particularly from, one other person. In fact, it might actually be a bad idea to seek confirmation. You think you've got something sorted out, but you ask someone you trust, maybe a partner or a close friend, their opinion, and the things they say could actually just be a damper on proceedings. They might say things which you don't want to hear, and which are not true, but it kind of upsets your equilibrium. So if you're feeling good about something, maybe keep that feeling to yourself. It's just a quiet confidence. You start to talk about things and you ask someone's opinion. Yeah, that's going to just bring you down. So with a moon in Aquarius, going back to that is quite independent-minded, as I said. So be independent-minded, and if you believe something's going to work, Aquarius, then I think it will work. And you can, in that sense, you can trust your own judgment. Pisces. Pisces, Venus is trine Jupiter this weekend. That's what I've been telling everyone. It's kind of getting a bit boring telling everyone that Venus is trine Jupiter. And Venus trine Jupiter is good for you. I mean, it has to be, doesn't it? I mean, after all, Jupiter is ruler of Sagittarius. And so if Venus is trine Jupiter, Venus is the lesser benefic, and Jupiter is, of course, the greater benefic. So if you've got Venus trine Jupiter, then you'd expect things to work very well for Pisces. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you need to have a crazy weekend, a crazy excessive weekend. No, that's not what it's about. It's just about feeling good about yourself and feeling that where you are, you've got it all sorted out, that everything is together and you're just feeling comfortable. And the more comfortable you feel, then the better things are. And I think that when you are doing things your way, perhaps away from other people, far from a madding crowd, then things are even better. So in a way, Pisces, you can do things on your own and you don't need any social input. Venus trine Jupiter, one thinks about socialization. Venus is a social planet, and so you'd think that might be a good weekend to party and all that kind of thing, maybe for some other signs, but not for you. I think that Pisces, you can rely on your own resources, and you're going to feel comfortable, and you are going to want to keep a lot of things to yourself. And I think that's going to be important. So when you discover something, when you realize something this weekend, there's really nothing much to be said. I think you're going to have the temptation, though, to talk. And given the opportunity, you will have a lot to say. But I think you need to monitor what you're saying. I don't think you want to talk about things that are very private to you or recent discoveries. I think you need to, at the moment, keep that to yourself. I mean, there's a temptation to talk too much. That is one thing. But I think that you should kind of resist that temptation. And, some people might be curious. They ask you questions. They want to know what's going on. It's natural to tell them what's going on, Pisces, but you don't have to tell them what's going on. And you don't even have to lie to them. Okay, you might tell them a white lie, I suppose, all things being equal. Pisceans can be quite good at lying, but I don't think it's necessary to tell lies. I think that you can just find a way of, I don't know, diverting the conversation, move it on to something else, or assuming there is a conversation. There doesn't actually have to be any conversations this weekend, or you can keep conversations down to a minimum, because I think it is a weekend when, you don't have to be anywhere, and there should be no pressure. Though I suppose I have to say that Jupiter is ruler of you. Jupiter is ruler of you. Jupiter rules Pisces. The other person, Mercury rules Virgo, your opposite sign. And right now, the other person, the other people in your life, they do seem to be a little bit set in their ways. And so that's another reason perhaps why you shouldn't engage too much with other people, because, they might start telling you what to do, or they might give you their view of the world, and they might be a little bit too clever. And if you find that someone is talking a lot and is being clever, then you might sort of feel that their way of doing things is better than your way of doing things, and that could just disrupt your inner harmony. So Pisces, it is a good weekend, but it's not a sociable weekend. It's a weekend when you're best focusing on your own business, and there are things that may be a little bit complicated you want to deal with over the weekend. And under normal circumstances, you might want to give it a miss, but, don't be afraid. You can deal with quite heavy issues, but in a way that is quite sort of light-hearted, easy and relaxed. In fact, something that you were really concerned about, once you start getting involved with it, you'll be asking yourself, why were you so concerned? And things will start moving very nicely, and you might be able to solve a few mysteries. Something you didn't understand, you now understand. And it may be that you can understand certain people without actually talking to them. You can just think about them. You can actually observe their footprints, whatever those footprints might be. I suppose the footprints, they might send you emails, there might be evidence of their presence. When you look at their footprints, you can actually see who they are. And there might actually be a moment of knowledge and awareness where you just see someone in complete, 3D Technicolor. You see who they are, and that allows you to make a decision, and that makes things just a lot easier for you. But overall, Pisces, it's a quietly fortunate weekend, and I don't think you actually have to do anything. And it's also a weekend where it's a good idea to keep your secrets secret, and because now is not really a time for disclosure. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at the weekend from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 54, which is the marrying maiden. And this represents a situation where we may be, in the first instance, rather too keen to do something. Or it may be someone who is too keen to maybe impose themselves on us. The marrying maiden is the image of a young woman who is in a hurry to get married. She is in a hurry to join with something, in a hurry to join someone's household. And in the first instance, it just may be that one shouldn't be in too much of a hurry to become part of something, and a bit of discretion is required. And if we meet someone who seems to be very enthusiastic to get to know us, then we might want to ask, what is their motive? This is not necessarily anything to do with romance. It can be to do with someone trying to sell us something, someone who takes an interest in us, and we're just wondering, what is their motive? And I think it's absolutely right that we do question their motive. Now, there is a moving line, and the bottom line moves. And the bottom line moving, it's actually quite a fortunate line. And it's telling us to be humble. It's addressing us as if we are the marrying maiden. And it's kind of saying that we should be comfortable with a secondary position. Because the way that I Ching puts it is that the marrying maiden it puts it in quite demeaning terms. It says that the marrying maiden is like a concubine who is like the second wife of the ruler, and maybe even a lame concubine, and someone who is satisfied with a supposedly inferior position in the household as the second wife, as the ruler's concubine, and this is not a good position to be in. But when in fact it's saying it is a good position to be in, and the marrying maiden does her thing, and she's humble, and it all works out well for her. So how do we translate that into sort of the modern world? So the modern world might say that, I know it's a weekend, but it might be taking a position, maybe a job, or maybe something to do with our social life, where it seems to be a little bit demeaning. We're not perhaps getting all the responsibilities and all the respect that we would like, but we just do our job. We do whatever we have to do, and we do it in a quiet way, and it's absolutely fine. And in that way, we actually get favourable attention, and we actually establish our position. So there's nothing wrong with a little bit of humility this weekend. And in fact, if there's someone or a situation where we're trying to get involved in it, a bit of humility can be very useful. Now, we do have the bottom line moving. That means that we do switch to a second hexagram, and what we switch to is hexagram 40, which is deliverance. And deliverance gives a different tone to the whole thing, because deliverance means escape. It means that perhaps we're in a bad situation, a difficult situation, and we're wondering how to get out of it, and we have our way. We can get out. And so maybe if we bring this whole thing together, the fact that we had the marrying maiden as the first hexagram, deliverance as a second hexagram, maybe that slightly alters how we understand the marrying maiden. It may be that we're in a situation that actually is demeaning. We're not being given the respect we deserve. I mean, it may not be disastrous because it was a fortunate bottom line moving, but we're not entirely comfortable with it. We perhaps feel we're not being respected. And, to begin with, we were perhaps too keen to get involved with someone or with an organization, and we now realize it's not for us, and we want to leave. And if we hold on for much longer, it may be difficult to leave. But deliverance is saying, here's the opportunity, you can get out. You've tried it, you don't like it, here's your exit. But that exit is not going to be open forever. Now's your chance. It's that sort of exit clause. Maybe you've signed up for something, maybe you've agreed to something, it's not entirely satisfactory, you thought it was going to be okay, you tried it, but it's not for you. And so with deliverance, if you want out, you can get out if that's what you want, but don't leave it too long. And then we have to consider Venus trine Jupiter. So this weekend, we've got this aspect, and Venus trine Jupiter. Some would say that it's the most fortunate aspect there is. You can understand logic for that, because Venus is the greater benefic. Sorry, the lesser benefic. Jupiter is the greater benefic. They're fortunate planets. And so if they're trine, remember, trine is a fortunate aspect. So if you've got Venus trine Jupiter in your chart, it might mean that you're lucky. You have opportunities. Things can happen your way. You don't even have to put much effort into it. So that's one way in which Venus trine Jupiter can work. And it can be a little bit indulgent too, because when you've got two benefics in trine to each other, it can just be too much of a good thing. And it might indicate excessive behavior, or it could represent lazy behavior, or enjoying too much of good things in life, drink, alcohol, I don't know, it could be casual relationships, partying. All of these we could associate with Venus trine Jupiter. And so I think if someone has Venus trine Jupiter, maybe the question is, what does someone do with their luck? Do they squander that luck, or do they just really make the most of everything they've been given? Or it could be that Venus trine Jupiter represents a point of destiny, a moment where someone has a great deal of luck. It's a lucky thing that defines who they are. Although I suppose you could say that if someone has Venus trine Jupiter and things don't work out, you could understand how Venus trine Jupiter could go bad very quickly. That's always a possibility with astrology. Venus trine Jupiter is not working out as someone expected, and it just collapses in on itself. So I think that is a possibility. So let's start by looking at some Venus trine Jupiter charts. Now I'm going to start with yours truly, because I do have Venus trine Jupiter, and on paper my Venus trine Jupiter is completely wonderful. So here's my Venus trine Jupiter. Venus in Cancer, trine Jupiter in Pisces. Now, the reason it's wonderful, supposedly, in theory, and I think you could actually get my chart wrong, or you could misinterpret my chart with that Venus trine Jupiter. So, Venus is in Cancer. Venus in Cancer, it's a little bit sentimental, isn't it? Maudling sentimentality. I do have a sentimental streak, even a maudling sentimental streak, but I'm ashamed of it, actually, that Venus in Cancer. You don't see it very often. And it's trine Jupiter, and Jupiter is in the exaltation of Venus, Jupiter in Pisces. And so having a Venus-Jupiter mutual reception in exaltation, you could say that this is an absolutely wonderful aspect, that maybe I would be a good psychotherapist or a healer. There's Jupiter conjunct Chiron, and fortunate. Am I fortunate? Well, I perhaps had a lot of opportunities. Maybe I think I squandered the opportunities that I've been given. To be honest, my parents were, I would have said, relatively prosperous. I went to independent schools. I had the opportunity of having a very good education. I mean, I got a degree. I suppose I got a degree from a relatively good university. It wasn't a brilliant degree, but so I've had plenty of opportunities. So you could say that's Venus in mutual reception to Jupiter. At school, at university, I was completely lazy. I didn't make the most of the opportunities that I had. I would have said that to a great extent I squandered my opportunities, and there is a sort of lazy streak. I often think the I Ching says this, that people who treat life lightly, or don't take life seriously, it never works well. And I can sometimes think that that's the case with me. I've perhaps taken life a little too lightly, and now perhaps I'm paying the price of that, perhaps with Venus trine Jupiter. Now, as far as a psychotherapist and all that kind of thing, I've had fantasies about being a psychotherapist, and I've realized that I was I went to, I've actually did courses, and I've been to courses. I did try the first year of training or whatever. It became quite clear that I had absolutely no ability in terms of psychotherapy. Even though I have a Venus mutual reception Jupiter in water signs, it seems good, and in fact I've got a grand trine in water. You'd say Jupiter trine Neptune trine Venus, but no, I do not have an ability to fundamentally relate to another person on an emotional level. And I think the clue would be that Mars in Taurus doesn't matter. That Mars in Taurus rising is the grit in the viewing port. The ascendant is about how you relate to other people, and Mars in Taurus is about grit. It's not well placed in Taurus, but I suppose you could say astrology. I suppose maybe I have some ability at astrology. Maybe that's Venus trine Jupiter, but there's a sort of sense of fantasy there. But anyway, you've seen me enough. You can be a judge of how perhaps that Venus trine Jupiter in mutual reception is working. I sometimes forget about it. When I was thinking about talking about the Venus trine Jupiter, I had to remind myself that I've got Venus trine Jupiter, because it's not an aspect that I don't think automatically about myself. Oh, I've got Venus trine Jupiter. It's not an aspect that I think much about. But when I do think about it, I'm sort of bothered by it, because I'm wondering, does it really work? Anyway, I'm talking too much about myself. So let's look at some people who have Venus trine Jupiter. So here is Alec Baldwin. So Alec Baldwin, I don't know anything about him. He's an actor. He accidentally shot someone when in the filming of Rust. We don't have a time of birth for Alec Baldwin, but he does have Venus trine Jupiter. So it's quite a close Venus trine Jupiter. Now you could say that if you want to be a Hollywood actor, you're going to need to have a lot of luck. I don't know what opportunities he had, how he got into Hollywood, and how he became a star. But I would have thought having Venus trine Jupiter must have helped. And Venus trine Jupiter, I suppose, is good for making contacts, and he's got Saturn here. Saturn sextile Venus, Saturn sextile Jupiter. So maybe Jupiter was able to sort of stabilize that, and Venus trine Jupiter wasn't sort of overly as indulgent as it could be. You see, my Venus trine Jupiter is in water signs. His Venus trine Jupiter is in air signs. So that maybe it's sort of less wishy-washy than in water signs. So I was thinking about this Venus Jupiter trine. The only thing I really know about him was when he accidentally shot this woman on the film set of Rust. So I was just curious to know what was going on when that happened. So the shooting happened on October the 21st, 2021. And interestingly, the sun was at 28 Libra. So the sun was exactly conjunct his Jupiter at the time of the shooting. And so I think this is when he didn't realize that it was a gun that was loaded with a real bullet. It went off, and he killed this woman who was on the set. And so that's Sun conjunct Jupiter. But I suppose Sun bringing Jupiter out into the open. Jupiter's not in the 8th house, by the way. I don't know his time of birth. It just looks as if it's in his 8th house. And I suppose Jupiter was relative. There was a sort of wide Sun-Jupiter trine at the time of the shooting, and sort of Jupiter was moving towards the conjunction of Venus. But the main thing is, Sun being conjunct his Jupiter. So that's what did it. And I suppose one has to think about that works. So anyway, Alec Baldwin is someone who has Venus trine Jupiter. Someone else who has Venus trine Jupiter, who I think really does very much fit the symbolism of the aspect, is Jesse Livermore. I mean, I've looked at his chart quite a lot, but Jesse Livermore, probably the most successful private investor who's ever lived. He had this pattern in his life of making loads of money and then pushing it a little bit too far, becoming bankrupt, then recreating himself, getting a little bit more money, then pushing that into the market, and then getting all his money back and more. And he did this again and again and again. During the Wall Street crash in 1929, he made a fortune. But in the end, by the late 30s, he was bankrupt again, and the rules had changed. There was more control over the markets. He had no way. He couldn't make his money. He'd lost his magic, and he shot himself. And you can see he has Venus in Leo, trine Jupiter in Sagittarius. Jupiter in Sagittarius, Venus trine Jupiter in fire signs. This is someone, he has a load of planets in fire signs. Someone with absolutely great intuition. He just understood the way things were moving. And, he said in his sort of autobiography that he wrote with someone else, that he could just read the tape, as they say. He could just look at the planet, the way the prices were working. He just knew where they were going. And there is that intuition, that fiery intuition. Jupiter in Sagittarius, trine Venus in Leo, and so a very intuitive person who was able to make the connections. And then he would keep going in the same direction, and then he would build very big positions and keep piling into his successes, and then he'd go too far and he'd lose everything. And he couldn't, once the juggernaut had started, he kept moving in this same way until in the end he lost it. But somehow he was always able to come back until he finally couldn't come back, which was when he killed himself. And Joe Biden has Venus trine Jupiter. Venus 28 Scorpio, trine Jupiter in Cancer. You could say Biden is lucky. I mean, to get to be president, I don't know how he's rated as a skillful president. He's not exactly Lyndon B. Johnson or Richard Nixon in terms of political skills, but he was a wheeler and dealer, and Venus trine Jupiter did seem to work for him. I mean, he is president of the United States, at least nominally, and so that Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, it might be retrograde. Venus in Scorpio, not so great because it's in its detriment, but still, I would have said that as an example of someone who was quite fortunate, who had a certain amount of luck. And then we have to think about people who maybe didn't use their Venus trine Jupiter quite as they should have done. And Sid Vicious had Venus trine Jupiter, and there's his Jupiter in 21 Virgo, Venus conjunct Algol trine Jupiter. It's quite a wide trine, but I suppose in his short life he was successful. He became a star with the Sex Pistols, and Venus trine Jupiter, of course, can be a bit indulgent and can take things too far. And of course, he died of a heroin overdose. And that Jupiter in Virgo is a bit of a problem. I mean, Venus is kind of, well, it is conjunct Algol, but is in its own sign. But Jupiter in Virgo, Jupiter rules Pisces. So in Virgo, Jupiter is can just focus too much on the details. So he was, taking heroin. Maybe why does he take heroin? Maybe there were things about the world which were imperfect, Jupiter in Virgo, and focusing on the details. So what do you do with, how do you get rid of the imperfections with those details? Well, you can maybe inject yourself with heroin until those imperfections just go away and everything is fine. So that might be how his Venus trine Jupiter was working. And with Venus trine Jupiter, as I talked about my own chart, you can be given opportunities, but that doesn't mean to say that you're always going to be able to make the most of those opportunities. And yeah, there is scope for indulgence. And Dodi Fayed, remember him? I don't know his time of birth, but he was the one that Princess Diana had a liaison with, and of course he was killed in the same car as Diana, and he had Venus trine Jupiter. There's his Venus in Pisces, trine Jupiter in Cancer. A really nice Venus in Pisces, trine Jupiter in Cancer. Of course, he had an incredibly rich father. I think he was involved in films, and so he was. How old was he when he died? He would have been 40, early 40s. So a bit of a playboy, I would have said. And going through tunnels in Paris very fast, having a chauffeur, everything sorted out for him. I mean, yeah, I know he did some stuff with films, but there is a playboy aspect to Venus trine Jupiter, and perhaps Venus and Jupiter are just too good here. Them both being in their own sign, and maybe that contributed to his lifestyle. And of course, in some ways, his lifestyle led to his own death. If he'd been more serious, he wouldn't have been racing through Paris with Princess Diana. Didn't he have something better to do? So that's Dodi Fayed, and I will actually be coming back to his chart briefly when I look at some events connected with Venus trine Jupiter. Now we do have two Czech killers who have Venus trine Jupiter, and one Czech killed for the right reasons, and the other Czech killed for completely the wrong reasons. So quite recently, there was a massacre in Prague where this man, what's his name, David Kozak, who was born in 1999, he was a very brilliant student, but he started shooting people. He'd already killed a father and his infant son in a forest near Prague, and then he went to the centre of Prague, and he sometime later, and he started opening fire close to the university, or in the university, I think. And he had Venus trine Jupiter. So with this aspect, it may be that if Venus trine Jupiter is not being used and doesn't have a way of expressing itself, maybe it can just collapse in on itself and become a complete negative. And I suppose Venus trine Jupiter, he executed a massacre, and he was, I suppose you could say, successful in terms of executing a massacre. I mean, I don't have his time of birth, but that's a reminder. But just because you got Venus trine Jupiter doesn't mean it's a good thing. And if you are not using this Venus trine Jupiter, and perhaps you have other psychological issues, then it could become a real problem. And another Czech who had Venus trine Jupiter is Jan Kubiš. So Jan Kubiš was born on June the 24th, 1913, and he had Venus trine Jupiter. Again, I don't have his time of birth. And he is famous for assassinating Reinhard Heydrich, the guy the Nazi in charge of the Czech lands at the time of the occupation during the Second World War. And he has Venus at 17 Taurus, trine Jupiter at 14 Capricorn. So, Venus in Taurus, and he's got Mars in Taurus. Venus in Taurus is very persistent. Venus in Taurus. This is something that needs to be done. And Jupiter in Capricorn, I mean, it can be a bit of a problem. Jupiter is in its fall in Capricorn, but maybe Jupiter is very focused on Venus trine Jupiter, very focused on a mission and luck. And his killing of Hydric was, I suppose, complete luck in a kind of a way. I mean, he and the other guy who did it, the Slovak Gabčík, Gabčík, just as Hydric's open-top Mercedes came round a corner, Gabčík tried to fire a machine gun at Hydric, and it jammed. And then, logically, you would have thought if someone had just tried to assassinate you, Hydric should have just driven off, but he ordered the car to stop, and that was the first piece of luck. And Hydric then proceeded to chase his wannabe assassins, who up until that point had failed. And so Kubiš threw a bomb into the car, and it blew up. And Hydric wasn't even badly injured, but what happened was that he was able to continue running after them, but some little piece of horsehair got into Hydric's body, and he sort of got blood poisoning, and sometime later he died. So there's, from a sort of a Jupiter in Capricorn point of view, there was a certain amount of luck in terms of the assassination attempt. I mean, in the end, it became a successful assassination, but there was a certain amount of luck there, and I think that may be how Venus trine Jupiter was working. So those are some people with Venus trine Jupiter. But what about events? People are putting videos out on YouTube saying how wonderful Venus trine Jupiter is, and I've just been talking about Venus trine Jupiter in a very positive way. So looking at those events, are they good? So I've just talked about Dodi Fayed. So we know when Dodi Fayed died. Well, of course, he died at the same time as Diana, pretty much. Okay, she died a bit later in hospital. So that's a chart of the accident in Paris. And at the time of that accident, there's Venus. Venus was exactly trine Jupiter, and Jupiter was on the mid-heaven. I mean, what a wonderful time. Venus trine Jupiter, Jupiter on the mid-heaven. That's great. And it should have been a great time for Dodi, because he's got Venus trine Jupiter in his natal chart, so he's really gravitating towards that Venus trine Jupiter event. And Venus is the princess, and Venus is in Libra. Venus is trine Jupiter, and the princess dies, the princess gets killed. And so we're perhaps seeing Venus trine Jupiter as not necessarily being a particularly fortunate thing. I mean, look at the moon. The moon was, at the time of the crash, was exactly opposition Jupiter, very close to the opposition, and was moving to a sextile of Venus. So perhaps Venus trine Jupiter, this is a moment when the princess became immortal. Princess, she's a year older than me, so she would have turned 63 this year, so she's the aging princess. But no, she's immortal. She's going to be 36 years old forever. And so Venus trine Jupiter sort of put the focus on Diana forever, and perhaps guaranteed her persistent fame. So that may be one way in which Venus trine Jupiter works. Now, Venus trine Jupiter, if you want to start something, you might well want to do it when Venus is trine Jupiter, because it's a lucky trine. So let's think of an organization that started when Venus was trine Jupiter. And the foundation of Alternative for Deutschland, this right-wing party in Germany. I I don't know exactly what time it was. It was in the evening of February the 6th, 2013. I've gone for 6 p.m., which would have the moon at 29:27. If it was officially founded, say, an hour later, the moon would be in Capricorn. So I don't know whether it's Sagittarius or Capricorn. But Venus is moving to a trine of Jupiter. So if you want to start something, whatever it is, like a political party, then doing it when Venus trine Jupiter, all things being equal, is probably quite a good thing to do. So that may be an example of an organisation, well, whatever you think of Alternative for Deutschland, it's been successful. It's doing very well politically. It's just done very well in the local elections in Saxony and Thuringia. So maybe that had something to do with its foundation. And what about war? I mean, in terms of war, the American Civil War. The American Civil War started with Venus trine Jupiter. So is that what people had in mind when they were thinking about all the wonderful, great things that can happen when Venus is trine Jupiter? There's Venus at the time of April the 12th, 1861. Venus was at 14 Aries, trine Jupiter in Leo. So that's a nice trine. And Venus is in Aries, and so Venus trine Jupiter, it's like the release, and I do think that Venus is the planet of war. I think that, you know, you could say that Mars is a planet of war, Venus is a planet of victory, but I do think there is a connection between Venus and war. I just feel really comfortable about that. Maybe it's a sort of a feminine side of war, but there is definitely a connection there. And so Venus trine Jupiter may be the beginning of war. If you like, whatever the gods of war are appeased when Venus is trine Jupiter. This is when they start coming out into the open, maybe. So let's not be too enthusiastic about Venus trine Jupiter. And then military operations. In the Second World War, we had Operation Uranus. Now, Operation Uranus is not necessarily particularly majorly configured, but at the time of Operation Uranus, now I don't tell you what Operation Uranus was. This was the Soviet operation to encircle Stalingrad. So this is when the encircling of Stalingrad started. And interestingly, Joe Biden, November the 19th, 1944, Joe Biden was born, just a reminder, Joe Biden was born on the 20th of November 1942. So that same trine, Venus trine Jupiter, that Joe Biden was born under, because he was born, as he was coming out of the womb, the Soviet armies were surrounding Stalingrad. You would have thought he would have learnt something in terms of the way he's been treating Russia with this war with Ukraine. But no, maybe that's just his experiences of the world as he was being born gives him a problem with Russia. He was perhaps at some unconscious level aware of Russian might being born at the time of Operation Uranus. So at the time of Operation Uranus, on November the 19th, 1942, you can see that there was Venus trine Jupiter. And I suppose that even though Venus is combust, if you want to start an operation, all things being equal, having Venus trine Jupiter it's a good thing to have, because it might suggest that there could be ultimate success. Now, what about things that are really unpleasant? Really, really unpleasant. The Idaho murders. So the Idaho murders, when there were these 4 students in a house who someone broke in Moscow, Idaho, and killed them all, or 4 of them. There are some students in the house survived. The man accused of of these murders is on trial in Idaho. That's presumably on trial for his life, because it's a capital offence, certainly in Idaho. And here is the chart for the probable time when the murders happened, and Venus is applying to the trine of to a trine of Jupiter. And if that time 4 a.m. is correct, we would have Black Moon Lilith on the midheaven, and so we've possibly got a grand trine involving Venus, Jupiter, and the Black Moon Lilith, and we've got sort of the moon in Cancer. So, I mean, this is rather problematic, because if you look at it from a murderer's point of view, and he wants to choose a time when he's going to be able to kill a lot of people, you could in a way say, well, he seemed to choose the right time. Or did the time choose him? I don't know. But I suppose in terms of, he was successful in killing a lot of people in a single house. Okay, he was caught in the end. Or, well, we don't know if he's caught in the end, I should say, because someone is on trial for their life. We don't know for sure whether or not he's guilty. We don't know. But someone was arrested and charged for the crime. And so we got Venus trine Jupiter and Black Moon Lilith. I mean, it's what if that is a real Black Moon Lilith event? I would have thought, sort of dark, uncertain motives, psychologically. Who knows what the underlying reason was? But Venus in Scorpio was trine Jupiter in Pisces, and that kind of sort of fits. So Venus trine Jupiter. So when you hear people talking about the wonders of Venus trine Jupiter, just remember the Idaho murders. So it's not always great, and bad things can happen. Wall Street crash in 1929, October 29th, 1929. Venus was in Libra, very nice, and in fact, we've got. In fact, right now we've got Venus is in Libra, trine Jupiter in Gemini. So I'm certainly not saying it's going to be a crash. I'm not saying it's not going to be a crash, but it's just an interesting coincidence that we have Venus in Libra trine Jupiter in Gemini right now, and that was a feature of the Wall Street crash. It was applying this conjunction. It wasn't actually there all the way. The moon had just crept into Libra. So it was sort of making a conjunction to Venus, but it just gives you the whole sort of feel of the day when you have Venus trine Jupiter. And I suppose that might be over-optimism, people taking things too far and the bubble starting to burst. So, and that's a reminder perhaps that Jupiter can be about excess, Venus can be about money, thinking everything's going to work, and in fact it doesn't work at all. Nazi Germany, when Hitler came to power, Venus was trine Jupiter. I mean, great day, yeah, sure. Venus was at 19 Capricorn on the midheaven, and Venus, remember the planet of victory? You know, you can think of these saluting Nazis, Sieg Heil and all that kind of stuff. Venus on the midheaven, trine Jupiter. Jupiter in Virgo, sure. And it's not a great sign for Jupiter, but, just another reminder, we can't expect good things to happen when Venus is trine Jupiter. Though, of course, if you were a Nazi, you would have said this. If you were a Nazi astrologer, you would say, well, this is obvious, isn't it? Venus trine Jupiter. It's a nice aspect. This is when Hitler comes to power. This is when the Nazis come to power. This is when Hitler is made chancellor. So with these Venus trine Jupiter, it depends on your perspective. Of course, if you are a critic of alternative for Deutschland, you might observe the comparison. Venus-Jupiter was trine when the Nazis came to power, and Venus-Jupiter was trine when the alternative for Deutschland was formed. Whether or not there's a connection between the Nazis and alternative for Deutschland, and I'll leave that up to you. Now, finally, when I was born, I've talked about my birth, and I was born on May the 30th, 1962, and something I do. I wanted to know what is the big event that happened when I was born. You always do that. You want to, I think, what was happening on May the 30th, 1962? What's the or closest to when I was born? Well, Adolf Eichmann was hanged just after I was born. So Adolf Eichmann, remember, was a war criminal. He was had a big responsibility for the Holocaust, transporting people to the death camps, and this is the chart of his execution. And as with my chart, Jupiter was in Venus. Venus was in mutual reception to Jupiter by exaltation, and there was a grand trine. There was a grand trine in Scorpio. Sorry, a grand trine in water signs. So, and Pluto was on the descendant. So, Venus trine Jupiter might be the final release of something. And I suppose if you were Israeli or a victim of the Holocaust, you would regard this as being a good day of seeing this man who's been responsible for all these crimes finally having to face the consequences of what he did. So that would be Venus trine Jupiter, and people being very happy in some quarters about his death. So as you can see, Venus trine Jupiter has there are many ways in which Venus trine Jupiter can manifest, but to think that Venus trine Jupiter is necessarily a good aspect, certainly in terms of what happens in the world, it may depend on your perspective. And we've seen how horrific murders can happen when Venus trines Jupiter, when the stock market can crash. So it's not always very fortunate when Venus trine Jupiter. So if you're excited about Venus being trine Jupiter, maybe I'm just suggesting perhaps you should curb your excitement. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for this weekend. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful that you were to like it. If you are not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.